Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome to a end of the week, almost spring break version of the Modcast. I'm Jeff Ketchum, brought to you by, joined by Alex Dunlap and Jason Sucamel. I was going to mention a sponsor, but we don't really have one. But we will thank everybody in the Specs chat. We do love you guys participating, joining in. If you want to send us a super chat, you can do that. Otherwise, we'll definitely be looking for comments to add to the discussion. Yeah, we were a little tardy, Alan. No need to call us out on that. Come on, man. We're all friends and family here. But yeah, I was late picking my kids up too. Sometimes 3:10 actually means 3:12. When you have kids and they're in elementary school, you eventually learn.
And those 2 minutes in the kid pickup line can mean a lot because that sets you back like 50 cars, and that 2 minutes turns into 25 minutes. Like, it's crazy.
Well, hey, we're here. We're just a smidge behind. Guys, we're talking freshmen today. Spring football, not that far away. 2 weeks from now, we'll be in it. There will be practices taking place. Guys will be lining up. I'm sure Alex has talked about it already today, but one of the things he was working on Orange Bloods, the website, and not the Orange Bloods Live YouTube channel. He did an offensive depth chart today, and part of the discussion was Brandon Baker, but there was some wide receiver discussion, and Ryan Wingo comes up, and suddenly I just started thinking about, look, man, I'm really excited to see which of the true freshmen, because most of the ones from this past recruiting class are already on campus. Only 5 didn't show up. So of the 19 or so that are on campus, Jason, I'll start with you. Who are you most excited to see how they start working out early on in the spring once practices get started here in a couple of weeks?
Well, I've just pulled up my commitment list that seems like forever ago. Kind of refresh my memory on some of these dudes. But,
Colin Simmons, Brandon.
Colin, of course. Obviously Colin. But, we talked about this a bit, and I think my perception is going to be maybe a little different than y'all's, which probably isn't unique. But I don't know that we're going to see a ton of action from these freshmen just because there's so much talent and to some degree depth on this roster nowadays that I think it's harder and harder for these freshmen to just come in right away and start or not start necessarily, but get a lot of work. That being said, it's an incredibly talented true freshman class. So if I look at if I go position by position, Trey Owens, you've got to get Trey Owens ready a little bit, right? I mean, it's not like they have a lot of bodies at the quarterback position. Running back position, I think both those guys are immensely talented, but they're going to be battling for that third spot. I mean, I think the top 2 spots on the depth chart are pretty well solidified. So, Jarrett Gibson, Christian Clark, can either of those guys make waves? It's possible. They're going to be, running probably third team, but they'll get some work and they could make some waves. I think Ryan Wingo, you mentioned that receiver. Parker Livingston hasn't played football, guys, since early September, but I'm curious to see, assuming he is healthy. I know he's healthy, but if he can shake off the rust, I'm curious to see what Parker can do. I'd say the Aaron Butler kid, none of us got to see a lot of him because he got on Texas's radar so late. But boy, that dude's electric. Like, he's fun to watch on film. So I'll be curious to see how he kind of, measures up early on. Offensive line, you mentioned, and I'm just going, can Brandon Baker, can he make an early push? We've heard great reports about what he's done so far. I think that kind of front end, that top 5 is pretty well solidified. Most of the top backups are probably pretty solidified. But I think Brandon Baker has a chance to make a splash. Defensively, that's where I think you're going to see a lot of guys have chances. I mean, can Alex January come in and take the world by storm at defensive tackle? Maybe so. There's only one linebacker, so I'm not expecting a whole lot from the linebacker position. But the defensive backfield, I mean, it's a defensive backfield that has talent from last year, but it's also a defensive backfield that really struggled statistically from last year. It could use a boost. Does that mean Kobe Black, Xavier Filsaime, can some of those dudes, can Jordan Johnson Rebel, a guy that I think maybe can surprise some people, could he come in a little bit and shake some things up? I don't know. But Colin Simmons obviously is the one guy. When we all go out to practice day one, that's who my lens will be focused on to get that first picture, right? And I'm sure Alex will be watching him and writing on him. So Colin Simmons would be the one. I tell you, the one guy I mentioned earlier this week and kind of in passing, he won't be here this spring. But a guy that might wind up being the first starter from this group, punter Michael Kern. I mean, that dude legitimately has a chance to come in and be a day one starter. I know it's not sexy, but hey, Michael Kern, I mean, he has a chance to come in and replace Ryan Sanborn. It'll be him, or there's another walk-on guy that he'll be competing with. So he won't be here this spring. We won't be talking about him this spring, but certainly maybe by the time summer rolls around, we could be.
Alex, Jason makes a pretty good point. You know, when you're the number 3, 4, 5 team in the country that like the Longhorns will be, there will be less freshman impact than the last couple of classes. At least you would think on paper. There's a lot of guys and a lot of talent coming back, a lot of redshirt freshmen, third-year sophomores waiting to get on the field. For you, who, by the way, Jason, you better make sure Arch is the first photo you take. Just
well, good point. Yes, it's always Arch.
Make sure you get the Arch photos out of the way.
The old Onwar Richardson rule, man. You got to pay the bills first, right?
If you want to get 20 million views on something, you do Arch first. No offense to Colin Simmons. Alex, day one for you. Where are your eyeballs?
Well, like I said, man, I mean, for me, I'll be trying to look at everything, but it's weird because you know, Jason mentioned like every one of these freshmen when we talk about, right, it brings up a whole slew of other questions. It's like it's a complete domino effect, and we can talk all day about Sark. You know, the team's gotten better and they've recruited better and they're good players in front of these guys, and I think in certain positions that's true. But you also have to think about. Let's just look at 2021. So that would have been Xavier Worthy's first season at Texas. He plays 85% of snaps that year. Then Byron Murphy that year played 33% of snaps. He was a freshman in 2021. Not as much impact in 2022 among freshmen defensively. Let me just look on offense just real quick. I didn't know what we were going to talk about prior to the show, but I was just kind of looking over this because I did know that I did notice that last year there were some dudes who kind of came in and were used a lot, right, as freshmen in 2023. So in 2021 there was Murphy, there was Worthy, and then this last year, of course, you had C.J. Baxter. He played the second most snaps among running backs. He played 33% of snaps. Jonte Cook though last year only 12% of snaps. But then on defense, you think about Anthony Hill. Let me pull up their numbers. So Anthony Hill played the 6th most snaps on the team on defense last year, 55.35%. Manny Muhammad played the 10th most snaps on defense, 47%. Derek Williams played the 12th most snaps on defense, 44%. So even though the recruiting has gotten better, it feels like since the recruiting has gotten better, that means better, good, really awesome new freshmen are going to be coming in, right? So it's I do think some of these guys are going to have to play. And for me, what's on the top of my mind is just thinking about what's going to happen with Ryan Wingo. Because I don't know. I don't know how to make nuts and bolts of what's happening at the wide receivers. We can go into exactly why if you'd like, Catch. But for me, obviously Colin Simmons is the first guy I always think of because it's always Colin Simmons no matter what, right? But that brings up the conversation of how much does he split with Trey Moore, or is there a sub package for him, or does Ethan Burke move over there and start splitting reps with Barron Sorrell and stuff? It's like there's a bunch of things that sort of go into those discussions that probably need to be addressed. And the stuff that I talked about in my write up today for my first depth chart projection, specifically revolving around Jonte Cook, where he lines up, and what that will mean for Matthew Golden and or Ryan Wingo. That's the first thing that sort of comes to mind to me offensively, as far as which one of these guys might contribute super early on.
Real quick, we got a super chat from Tom G. Want to hit that $10. Thank you very much, Tom. Heard OB shout out today on National College Football Show about the Manning EA opt out. The funny thing about that is we had a conversation earlier that day. And if you've noticed, Tom, a lot of the shows we've been doing House Divided, we did a Colin Simmons update. We did a Jelani McDonald update. We're kind of going through a number of different young guys doing updates on them, information for the war room and stuff like that. And I mentioned to Anwar, I was like, look, nobody's done it, but you could either pull together the information that you've already used on Arch Manning for the last couple of weeks and make a show out of that, or check in and see if there's anything new to report on Manning. And that was the whole impotence behind Anwar, I think, checking in, kicking some tires on the Arch Manning front and coming away with that whole EA Sports thing. I wonder how much longer that would have stayed undercover, because all of that kind of happened in one day. And sure enough, Anwar had himself an Arch Manning update. Jason, I think one of the interesting things, Alex brings up Ryan Wingo. There's just a freshman wide receiver conversation that's taking place. That's its own conversation. There's a lot of portal guys coming in. A year ago, that helped Texas. I don't think Texas gets to the national semifinals without Adonai Mitchell, but it served as a roadblock for Jonte Cook to a certain extent. You heard not from Jonte Cook, but there are people that are curious about why would young wide receivers go to Texas and play if every year Texas is just going to go into the portal market and block these paths for playing time. It's a fair question.
Well, didn't Cody have that recruit he was talking to, like Taz Washington? He said he's going to watch
Williams. Yeah, Taz kind of mentioned in a roundabout way. Taz kind of verified that and said, like, "Hey, I'll be watching to see what happens with Jonte this week." And the portal,
crazy, man. Like, that's a real deal. That's a real thing that they're looking at. It was wild.
So, I think Jonte's going to get all of the reps he wants this spring. But what does it mean for Aaron Butler, who's from the state of California? Probably doesn't just want to sit and wait in the pipeline for his opportunity in 2 seasons. Same thing for Ryan Wingos. And I think Jason mentioned that you've got 2 other wide receivers as well in Freddie DeBose and Parker Livingstone. And you wonder, 4 freshman wide receivers coming in, do any of them get on the field? Does Ryan Wingo get more playing time than Jonte Cook was able to get a year ago? Is there more veteran bodies on campus? So, Jason, it will be, I think there will be high school senior wide receivers who the Longhorns are recruiting that are having certain things whispered in their ears. It'll be interesting to see in the spring how much action some of these young freshmen get and whether or not that is a conversation that can be settled in the spring and just say, hey, look, whole bunch of guys are getting a bunch of reps. Everything's fine. Or will we see it carried over into the season? We may very well still get that no matter what. But suddenly there's a young wide receiver and how much they play question coming off of last year in this portal class.
It's a weird kind of balancing act for me. Yeah, you need to keep those freshmen happy so that other freshmen and their high school coaches and their trainers kind of get happy. Hey, look, my kid got some early playing time. He got a fair shake. But it's really pretty easy if you're a Texas coach, to me, is to say, hey, if you're the best guy, you're going to play. As good as Jonte Cook is, and he was a 5-star guy, and we think he's going to be a potential first-round draft pick, he was playing behind 2 probable first-round draft picks. I mean, what do you expect? We're playing for championships here, guys. We're not, we're not pussyfooting around and playing favorites. I mean, I don't know what was expected. Did someone expect Jonte was going to go out and catch 50 balls last year and take balls away from Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy? Well, that's ridiculous. Yes. That's ridiculous. I mean, listen, I would say, hey, we know receivers are a bit diva-ish with their behavior sometimes, but sometimes you got to check them a little bit. Be like, dude, come on. We had 2 guys who are probably going in the first round, 2 guys who just dominated the combine. What the hell did you expect? Jonte got on the field. He got some experience, kind of got out there, got to get to see what it's like out there and what the game speed is like. And you know what? Now's going to be his time to shine. God forbid he had to wait 1 year and play kind of a role for 1 year behind a really stacked veteran wide receiver group. And now suddenly with the portal, it's a really stacked veteran receiver group again. But you know what? If Ryan Wingo's better than one or two of these guys, he's going to play more. I mean, these coaches, they're out there to win championships. They're not playing favorites. So, it's a kind of a double-edged sword. It's a bit of a balancing act. But in the end, man, you just got to say, hey, if you have concerns because we're playing guys from the portal, well, then come in and be better than these guys. Have some confidence in yourself and show that you're better from these guys in the portal, in the practice, and you'll be a starter. You'll be our go-to receiver. I mean, we did it with Xavier Worthy when he was a freshman. So why wouldn't we do it with you? If you're the best player, we will do it again. But if you need a little seasoning and these guys are further along than you, then that's okay too. We will get you to that level, but it just might take a little longer. So, there's ways to spin it. But yeah, there is some finessing of egos that needs to happen, I think, as well. So,
well, Alex, 2 thoughts on that, and I'll let you respond to that in any way you want to. One, the short rotation at wide receiver, we can argue about whether that was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. They made the college football playoff. So, every time Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell came off the field, you're taking away a really high-level player and putting in a guy that wasn't quite at that level. 2, generally speaking, you could have some nitpicks about Sarkisian's, I don't know, decision-making at times with personnel. I think we thought Jonathan Brooks probably should have been ahead of C.J. Baxter earlier than it all went down, and that, it really took injuries to happen. But Alex, by and large, I see a meritocracy when under Sarkisian that, you mentioned all those freshmen and the percentages they played on the defensive side of the ball. Xavier Philsammy, Colin Simmons, those guys will play as soon as they prove that they're ready to be on the field. Like, this staff has done a pretty good job of making sure their best players are on the field. It doesn't feel like we're very often having that conversation, really, other than running back over the course of the last couple of seasons. It's not something that's been talked about a lot.
Oh, it gets me fired up anytime people want to talk about a meritocracy, man. You're talking about the guy that named
Google that. Like
you're talking about the guy that named his son Merit, But I think you're right though. You're exactly. Everything you said. Spot the lie. How are you going to take 80 or X off the football field, right? It's like Jason was saying, they're not here to placate these guys. They're here to win football games, and these guys came to Texas because they want to win football games. And Jonte knows that he's next man up. He feels he's next man up. I think Jonte is the kind of guy that, I think that everybody I talk to at the combine, man, when you ask them who's next, it's like even the defensive guys are like, oh, Jonte, of course, Jonte this, it's just Jonte. It's what people say. It's just so for everything that we've seen of him and the flashes we've seen, like in the spring game and stuff like this, right? Everything that we saw in the spring game last year, and then the stuff that we saw out of him at the various camps, and the stuff that we just saw in his huddle reels and everything. He's an amazing player. So, last year as a true freshman, he was not Xavier Worthy, and he was not Adonai Mitchell, and Sark didn't want to play him in the slot, and that was just that, right? I feel like now is going to be for sure his time to step up. The question that we're talking about today, though, is just, and this comes back to Wingo, and my theory that Wingo might actually kind of be in line here to play a good bit in the spring, because if you look at, so they have to fill Adonai Mitchell's role. That's more of a traditional X. And I know it's not exactly how Sark does it, right? But we don't need to get into the minutia of it. We can just call him the X and the Z, right? The Z is the stretch flanker. That's Xavier Worthy. The X is the more, your X wide receiver, your big go up and get it, line right up on the line of scrimmage, be able to handle cornerbacks in the rare occasion that they do press in college football, stuff like this, right? Well, for that kind of player, you want that player to be a little bit bigger, a little bit taller, right? Have a little bit more of an angular frame. And whenever you look at these guys in their bodies, of the dudes coming in that look like it, you have Parker Livingstone, who's 6'4", Freddie Dubose is 6'1", Ryan Wingo is 6'2". We've always said that Wingo looks like he's probably going to play X, right? Now, when we think about last year, last year Casey Kane was technically. Was it Casey Kane here last year? That's crazy that he was like he was here last year. Gosh, it feels like it's been a couple years since we've seen that guy on a football field.
Well, it has been.
Right. It was the bowl game a couple years ago. Yeah.
Well, he was technically number 2 on the depth chart behind A.D. Mitchell. But guess what happened anytime A.D. Mitchell's shoe fell off or something like this? Jonte Cook runs in the football game and plays X, right? Now, his listed position was as the backup to Xavier Worthy, but they played him at both of those throughout the course of last year, which goes to told me he practiced at X last year. He's certainly got better size than guys like Matthew Bolden and, or I'm sorry. Gosh, I get them all mixed up. Matthew Golden and, some of these other guys. He's taller than Aaron Butler. Certainly we know the guys like DeAndre Moore, Ryan Niblett, those guys are going to be playing in the slot. I think Isaiah Bond is probably going to be in the slot. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that, but I mean, he was 65% or 60% slot at Alabama, and it would seem to make the most sense to me. And so when you think about it, it's like, well, okay, Matthew Golden, Dana Holgerson's on record saying like that guy's a Z wide receiver all the way. He's a Z this, Z that. He's a stretch flanker. I mean, they did some stuff to sort of move him around, but that's what he played. He does not have the body type to be a traditional X wide receiver, certainly not in the mold of what Adonai was last year. Jonte Cook is a little bit more like that. But Xavier Worthy told me at the combine that Jonte Cook is for sure going to be lined up and doing what I did last year. Like he's going to be playing my role. So if that's the case, then I think that Jonte would be between Jonte and Golden. I would lean towards Jonte being the more talented player in that spot. And then if we're talking about Isaiah Bond in the slot, then what do we have at X? We have 3 true freshmen, the ones that I listed earlier, Dubose Jr., Livingstone, and Wingo. And to me, look, I love Parker Livingstone. I know I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's going to be better than a lot of people expect. I've been saying it for well over a year now. I think Freddie Dubose has some stuff to him that there are some coaches in Texas that really think he has some high-end elite skills. But Wingo is he's the kind of guy that Sark might have said, like, dude, look, man, at the time when he was recruiting Wingo, he was telling me, man, we need you to come in and play. Like, we need you to play. This was before all the transfer stuff. I mean, he probably has it in his head that he's going to play, and he's really, really good. He's got the size to do it. So I think depending on what happens over there, if they put Jonte at X because they really want to force Matthew Golden into the starting lineup, then I think that would certainly affect Wingo's playing time, and we might see a Wingo kind of like last year, 9, 10, 11% of snaps, the same way that Jonte was behind the trench starter last year. But if we're talking about Matthew Golden being in some kind of role where Texas sees him as like, he's our killer kick returner, and we're going to get him in here when we can move him around. He played in the slot some at Houston too. 35% of his snaps in Houston, he played in the slot. Maybe get him in the slot sometimes. Maybe we could see 4 wide receiver sets. Especially maybe during the spring. We haven't seen it much at all during the time that Sark's been here. But if Amari Nyblack can't participate, maybe we see some of that stuff and they just maybe try some things out. If that's the case, Wingo's going to have to play, dude. I mean, he's going to have to play.
He's got the best opportunity right away to come in.
He's going to have to. Yeah,
Jason, I just wonder with Wingo, at the bowl games, he wasn't the wide receiver amongst a really talented group in an all-star game setting. He lost his 5th star in part because on the practice fields, he just wasn't quite making as many plays over the course of 3 or 4 days. And look, I'm not saying he's not a 5-star. If you're watching this video and you're a Texas fan and you're like, that is messed up that they dropped a guy. They did that to Kelvin Banks and look how that turned out. Touche. We get it. We get it. Yeah. But it did happen. And I have to admit, there is a part of me that wonders, I feel like there's going to be a moment during the season, Jason, when there's oh shit, man, all of our sources all at once start saying Ryan Wingo's name. But I wonder, does that happen in the spring? Does that happen in the summer? Does it happen in August? Is it a month into the season and then it finally happened and you start seeing him sprinkled on the field a little bit more? The timeline for Ryan Wingo is I'm absolutely fascinated by it because I feel like the opportunity is going to be there, but when he actually grabs it and kind of runs off with it, I'm not exactly sure. I can't set my watch by it.
Yeah, that's tough because we've been talking about all the new veterans in front of him. He's certainly talented enough to do it in the spring. I mean, Alex said he's got the size. And listen, what I know of Ryan Wingo, he's a hard worker, dude. He's going to work kind of like what I used to say about Jonte. Those dudes are going to work to maximize their talent. They're extremely naturally talented, but they're not just going to get by on their God-given talents. They're going to work their asses off to maximize that God-given talent. He's got verified track times. Ryan Wingo does. I mean, physically, he's got it all. Mentally, he's a bright kid, man. I think he'll pick things up pretty quickly. I would not be surprised. It's going to be tough this spring, Catch, because there's only so many balls to go around. You've got all these, veteran presences on the field at receiver. But I could see Wingo coming in and making a dent pretty early. I mean, I think he's got that kind of talent, that kind of mindset, and certainly that kind of drive to come in and, carve out a niche maybe as early as this spring.
Well, but Jason, I mean, my point is, and I'm not arguing with you because I think we're both saying he could do it. I'm saying I think it's likely that he does it simply because of the type of receiver that Texas has and that fit a certain bill and then this sort of fit a certain mold. You know what I mean?
He's competing with who did he be like Isaiah Bond, John Tate Cook, Matthew Golden probably.
I think Bond will be working. I mean, this could be totally wrong, but I'm projecting Bond to be working with the slot guys, and you know that the slot guys work separately from the outside guys. So I think
I don't know why
you would nibble it and more.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah, it's a good problem to have, right? And
these are the wealthiest of wealthy problems.
Yeah, you don't want to be like a callous asshole, but like, hey, tough shit. The cream's going to rise to the crop. The rest of you are going to have to figure it out or move on. I mean, that's what championship elite programs. That's kind of the mindset you have. So, I guess maybe you're right, Alex. I don't know exactly where all these guys will line up. So obviously it depends on who he is competing with for snaps at what position. And I don't even know where Ryan Wingo is going to line up for sure yet. So some of that, depends on what kind of rotation he's working in at what position. Can he be versatile enough to play a couple to, move around the field a little bit? That'll help him, of course. But I just think from a pure talent perspective, Ryan Wingo, I mean, he didn't finish as a 5-star for Rivals, but there's a reason he was a 5-star for most of the year. He went down to San Antonio at the All-American game, and I was at practices, and he had some flashes. But, 5 stars, you expect to go down there and be like, okay, wow, this guy was a no-brainer 5-star. He made it easy. He didn't do that necessarily, but some of that, he didn't get a lot of opportunities when I was down there, Catch. And the timing, sometimes part of that's tough for receivers because the timing with these quarterbacks, they're just into the mix. They don't. So totally fair. I don't think it's fair to dock a guy too much, especially a wide receiver too much, just because he doesn't make a bunch of plays down at these All-American games. But I think Ryan Wingo certainly has the talent to come in. And like you said, it'll be a matter of when we start talking about him. I kind of probably lean a little bit like Alex. I think it might be in the spring. Is he going to be a frontline starter? No, I'm not expecting that. Is he going to make a couple wow plays where we check with sources after a scrimmage and like, dude, Ryan Wingo went off today and had a long touchdown and a couple of nice grabs? Yeah, I think that'll probably happen in the spring at some point.
And even though he wasn't a 5-star Catch, is he? I forgot how you define. Is he still one of your super blue chips?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
What is the cutoff?
Ironically, his final ranking was very close to what Xavier Worthy's was back in 2021. Just
Catch. What is your Chad Hastings and I were talking? What's the official cutoff? Is it 6.0 or higher for a super blue chip? Right.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the top 45-ish in the country. I don't remember where.
Well, it's like usually like top 60, 65.
I went through and looked. Last year there were only, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 44, and then the 45th player was a 5.9 or something like that. So.
Well, then there would have been fewer. I know that one of the reasons why they said they had fewer 5-stars was they didn't think it was as deep of a class.
39, number 40 last year was a 5.9. So the top 39 were 6.0. So There were only 39, if you classify them that way, super blue chips. So.
Interesting. I didn't even pay attention to that when they listed the final rankings. Wes, I think it's funny that you could have just been on the show and instead, thank you for the $2 super chat. We heart Aaron Butler too. All you had to do was click that link. And I know, business meeting, you were busy. We thank you for your $2. Alex, real quick, I want to move over to the defensive side of the ball, but I want to mention offensive line as well. It won't be about who's lining up with the first team. Well, yeah, the first team, but I'm just talking about as it relates to the freshmen. Where they have guys situated will be really interesting because here's how I look at Brandon Baker. Whatever they do with him this year is whatever they do with him. That guy did not come to Texas, like all 5-stars, to not be starting by the first game of his second season. So they'll know that. They knew that when they recruited him. That, you know, this isn't necessarily a guy that in September we want to have fourth string at, whether it's a left side or the right side. So I'm curious to see amongst the twos and the threes how the bodies are positioned on the first couple of days, just to kind of get an idea of, okay, this is what Baker will need to do to climb up to the twos as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, there might not be a climb. You know, I mean, I don't see it. I see that recruitment as being something where Steve Sarkisian said at the first signing day that, you know, running down each player, and then you take him at his word, you know, about this stuff. But the first thing he said was like, you know, you just look at him, you know, throw him in a particle acceleration chamber, and that guy pops out, and that's what you want for you tell that machine you want a left tackle, and that's what pops out, you know, something like that. Those weren't his exact words, but something very similar to that, right? I think the pitch
was him and
look,
Gooseby on the left side and the fighting for the second spot.
I kind of think that he's just going to get put in that second spot the same way when Kelvin Banks got to Texas, he just got put at the first left tackle. I think that the thing is, like, we're going to put you at the 2. We're going to learn behind Kelvin Banks, and next year you're going to be guarding Arch's blind side, and it's just that's the plan. I know that stinks for Trevor. I think Gooseby's good, but I think that Gooseby plays left. I mean, last year Trevor Gooseby and Jaden Chapman both played in the season, and both those guys played over at left tackle. So the way I have it on my depth chart, the way I think it'll be is I think it'll be Banks at left tackle. I think Baker will be with the 2s, man. He comes in, like I wrote in my notes in my write-up today. He walks into that offensive line room and change, and there's not too many of these guys that walk into the offensive line room and change it, right? He walks into it, he makes a big effect on it all on his own immediately. He changes. He's an awesome prospect, right? Not just everybody walks in with his recruiting pedigree and his high school profile that we've gotten to see, right? He's a really, really good player. I think he was recruited that way. And so, look, there's going to have to be some kind of but here, the other side of the coin is I don't think Sark loves to just bequeath things. And I don't think that he'll, maybe for the first day of practice or something like that, they'll run Gooseby out there as the number 2, or maybe Jaden Chapman, or they'll be rotating them in, and Baker might be kind of behind, for the very beginning. And then they kick the media out after 4 practices. And next thing you know, you know what I'm saying? Practice number 6, Brandon Baker's we're getting all the work with the 2s. Like, I think eventually that'll sort of be how that goes. But that's how I have it. I think in all reality, it might not be this way to start spring, but I think during spring it'll be Banks and then Baker's the clear kind of 1 and 2s, and then we'll see what happens with Gooseby and Chapman, because the fact of the matter is, over at right tackle behind Cam Williams, are they going to be the way I have it right now is I stuck the 2 big monster guys over there, right? Kirkland and Kojo behind him, because they fit the profile a little bit better of what it seems like he wants to be doing at right tackle, right? Those guys all look alike. Now in the future, could Gooseby or Chapman be good enough to where they move over there to right? Because it feels like to me, if we're talking about solely the 2023 guys, right? Gooseby, Chapman, Stroh, Kirkland, Kojo. Is that it?
You got it.
Okay. From what I've seen of him, I think Gooseby's best. So it could be, but clearly the other guys have lots of ceiling. They're monster dudes. They could turn out to be super good. But as far as the guy that comes in with the most technical skills, the best feet, the best balance, that's Gooseby right now, right? And if he can kind of maybe hold on to that, does he maybe eventually move over to right, or is he maybe too left tackle-y? I don't know. It feels like, though, to me, it feels like for the 2023 guys, their road to getting on the field, I think, is going to probably be over there at right tackle, just because I just think Brandon Baker presents such a good piece moving forward as sort of a cornerstone over there at left, if he comes in and he can play the way that we're projecting him to. And like I'm clearly pinning some pretty high hopes on him because I was so high on him as a prospect.
Hey, how good was DeAndre Carter last year that he played left tackle for Mater Dei, and Baker played right tackle. So, I mean, if we're talking,
they just didn't want to mess up what they had. Like,
man.
That dude's not as good as Brandon Baker.
Baker's better than that guy, man. Like, have you watched his film? Like that
he
other guy?
He certainly doesn't.
He doesn't move like him.
He doesn't move as well as Brandon Baker for sure. But he's a big boy.
Alex, Jason mentioned Alex January. From your vantage point, we know they still want to go into the portal and find another interior guy. It seems like there's a lot of bodies that January, because he's not going to play the nose, I wouldn't think. So but then again, maybe everybody gets nose in the spring.
Tavondre Sweat told me Alfred Collins probably plays nose. So like, I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. And I think if January really weighs 320, I think he play nose. But yeah, dude, doing the defense is going to be much harder. Catch like that's the one I'm going to have to really like. People are going to just say like, why do you have Ethan Burke lined up at a whole different position, and why do you have like it's gonna like you slacked me today saying like, hey man, like did you mean to have Jonte Cook at 2 spots? I was like, gosh,
I didn't slag you. I was just asking a question.
I got to check in on this thread because I know if Catch is asking me because people are probably giving me trouble. And of course, it's the same. Like, so I just know with the defense, there's going to be multiple things we're going to have to explain like this to rear that stuff off of the pass. But I think that the defense is just so much more interesting to talk about, like as far as the guys that could potentially play, and especially with the Colin Simmons stuff. But Alex January is that's super interesting too. I was a big fan of his sophomore tape. I was not a fan of his junior tape, and I thought his senior tape was I was like, man, he really bounced back. That was really awesome what he was able to do as a senior. Jason, do you think he really is 320?
He carries it really well if he is. Now, I haven't seen him in a while, Alex, but he didn't look 320 during his recruitment when I saw him. But that was a while ago. He could have packed on 20-ish pounds since then, and he certainly carries it well if he's 320.
So much of this is seeing how these guys look. That's why I love going to these first spring practices. It's your first look at how these guys look on a field with other college players. You know what I mean? I'll be really interested to see how January sort of looks there because, dude, the opening is there. Absolutely, man, for sure. The other thing is, of course, Colin Simmons. How does this work? Right? How does this work? Like all this, like Texas goes from having zero edge rush to getting a little bit better edge rush to, creeping up a little bit to where Ethan Burke was getting some stuff going this last year. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, you have a guy that had 14 sacks last year at UTSA. You have one of the best edge rushing prospects, certainly one of the fastest with the best get off and the most like kind of just jungle cat like closing speed I've ever seen in Colin Simmons. Right. It's like, just oozing with all kinds of upside. You're like, well, how are you going to play them both now? It's an interesting predicament to be in after it's like walking through the desert this whole time and coming onto a giant oasis and saying, well, what do we do with all this water? We don't have canteens to put it in. Like it's just, it's just like, what? So yeah, I'll be interested to see. Certainly, I think Colin Simmons is the one, like I would say Wingo on offense probably is in line to kind of have things come together where he plays a ton. I think the same can be true for Colin Simmons, but a discussion probably has to be had when you talk about Colin Simmons about what that would mean for Trey Moore if Colin Simmons is just playing, a whole ton of snaps.
Again, wealthy problems to have where you've got Burke, Simmons, Moore, not as much depth on the other side. It makes a lot of sense that Burke eventually starts platooning a little bit with Sorrell on that side. And what will they do when they know it's full-on pass rush? Will we see a lineup that has Moore and Simmons on the field together with maybe Anthony coming downhill somewhere in one of those gaps as well and truly frightening people? Oscar says, God catch for $4.99. Thank you, Oscar. It's been so long. Has it?
Oscar Elizondo. So good to see you. So good to see you,
Is it
sir.
me or you that it's been so long? I'm doing well. Thank you. Who's my favorite freshman this coming season? I don't know how you don't say Colin Simmons. Alex just described him with jungle cat closing speed. And I was like, give me my dopamine hit, Alex. Yes. I'm going to go watch some Colin Simmons from last year and look at that again. Yeah, it's hard. The thing is, you look at last year, Oscar, most of the freshmen that played, big-time recruiting profiles. I mean, a lot of 5 stars, a lot of high 4 stars. Who are those guys? on the team this year? Well, we've mostly talked about them. Ryan Wingo, Brandon Baker, Colin Simmons. I wonder, and we'll leave it with this in part because I got to take my kid to tutoring. Get ready for mathnasium. Just make sure that we got that ready to go. Kobe Black and Xavier Filsaime, right? These are guys with profiles that suggest somehow, some way they'll get them on the field. They did it with Derek Williams a year ago. They did it with Malik Muhammad. Jason, for Black and Filsaime, the depth chart looks a little different. They have brought in a transfer at safety. If you're Filsaime, you've got to get over Derek Williams and Andrew Makuba. If you're Kobe Black and you're playing corner, you've got to get over Malik Muhammad, and Terrence Brooks is back, and there's more depth there. They've got Gavin Holmes.
They might move Jahdae Barron to outside corner.
I'm fascinated to see where all of this leaves Jelani McDonald, another guy that we've talked about. But Jason, specifically Black and Filsaime, if you had to put money on one making a real first-year impact of those two, who would you put it on?
Man, that's tough. I kind of like Filsaime better in terms of his athleticism and his maybe versatility, but the depth at safety, I think Black has a chance just because, Terrence Brooks, I mean, we think he can be a great player, but he didn't have a great year last year.
That's exactly right.
The door's a little more open at corner, so I'd probably go Kobe Black right now. But there's so many, like Alex said, there's so many moving parts. So what happens if Jahdae plays corner? I mean, are either one of those guys athletic enough to play nickel if that happens? So I'd probably lean Kobe Black just because I think the door's open a little bit more there for a freshman to come in and steal a spot. But that's a really tough call, man.
Yeah, I think Jason was going down the exact right. He's like, that's exactly right. It's got to be Kobe Black. Andrew Makuba doesn't come here for his last year not to play, and Derek Williams is going to be. I talked about it on our show Tuesday, but I'll never forget whenever he came back in the Washington game, and McElroy's all talking about how what he'd heard in the production meetings, and that was what he heard with the production meetings was what he spouted on back out to the TV audience. He said, well, that's their best cover safety by far, and then they're getting him back. That should be a big shot in the arm. Maybe they can slow down Penix better with him in there. Guess it probably didn't happen too much, but. I think the Texas coaches view him as their best cover safety. I certainly do. So he came in as a really good prospect himself. I think those two guys going to be a lot tougher road to hoe than Derek Williams having to come in and beat out Jaron Thompson and Keaton Crawford that got burned once every 36 snaps, right? So, yeah.
Sorry, you just made me laugh.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's wrap it up because I don't want to be late for tutoring. Guys, thanks for joining us. Nice crowd today in the Specs chat. Thanks for everybody piling in, almost 400 as we leave you this afternoon. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have the old-fashioned. Alex will be up. I'll be up at noon, Chad and I don't know. Maybe we'll let Jason sleep in tomorrow. I don't know what the schedule is, but
I'm heading up to Dallas tomorrow at noon. The Rivals, the Under Armour camp is on Sunday, but I'm actually going to go up tomorrow and see my boy Jason Howell. Believe it or not, I'm taking my wife with me. Saturday is our anniversary, so we're going to do our anniversary thing Saturday. I'm going to cover the camp on Sunday. She can do who the hell knows what on Sunday. But
just going to Neiman Marcus and spending your good heart.
Better not, brother. You better hit TJ Maxx.
But hey, that's the way that he stays married, folks.
Yeah. So but I will be en route to Dallas mid-afternoon or early afternoon tomorrow.
For myself, for Alex, for Jason, who's got plans this weekend. Don't you guys do anything to break those plans for him? You know what I mean. Well, guys, we'll see you soon. For everybody here on Orange Bloods Live, thanks for your contributions today and watching. We do appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Later.